thank you so much, Sharice and Lieutenant Colonel Harwell, and everyone else for helping make this a possibility today. Wonderful opportunity to get together and have a engineering focused discussion. Always appreciate these meetings. So we'll go ahead and flip to the next slide here. We have a couple of housekeeping notes. As Sharice mentioned, she posted a link to the post websites there in the chat, and the slides are available there if you'd like to download those. As she also just mentioned, we're recording and we'll post these a little bit later on in the week to YouTube, and so other folks can watch if they were not able to dial in today with all the connection issues. Let's see, keep your cameras off, except when we get to the Q&A. We'd love to have you chime in at that point if you want to bring your camera and microphone up to do so. And you can also post questions in the chat as we go through the brief. And then we'll flip to the announcements here. We've got a combined meeting today, so we'll start with the Kaiserslautern post announcements. We just have a couple of quick ones from our post today. First, we are currently updating our post bylaws. So if you are interested in voting on those bylaws, please send that vote in to me. All the membership is considered a voting member on those bylaws, the revisions. If you did not get a copy of those, you'd like to take a look, please go ahead and send me an email. And also, please feel free to send your votes to me. We're going to close the voting. The official voting date is 7 May. That's when the official date of the vote is, but feel free to vote before then as well, digitally. We've got our golf tournament coming up in August, so go ahead and put that on your calendars, save the date. That should be a great event. Those are always wonderful, especially here in Germany. The weather's so great for our golf tournaments most of the time. Anything else you'd like to know about our website? It is posted to our website, so please go take a look out there as well. And then I will turn it over. I think, Sharice, were you going to go over the Rhein-Main events and news?
Yes, unless Brian Wybrecht, do you want to go over those or want me to?
Sharice, you can.
All right. Oh, that's right. You had to join by phone. So, all right. The Rhein-Main Post scholarship fundraiser is coming up on the 10th of June, so please sign up. And Ken Staley, you want to put in a plug for that?
Yes, of course. Thanks. So let's see. Good morning, everyone. We have I have the least interesting position in the Rhein-Main Post since 2014, which is the golf tournament coordinator. So please come out. You can see the theme this year is the Wild Wild West. I do not dress this way every single day in Germany. Sharice is in Texas, which is okay, but I am not. So it's only normal here in February in Cologne. No rifles, no horses, please, but you may bring your golf clubs. We look forward to seeing you all out there. It actually sponsors student scholarships, STEM, and summer programs for students as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. You can get more information on our website, including the registration form. So please, we hope to see you all out there. I also want to put in a plug for the Europe region news flash. And that's probably how most of you know me. You get spammed by my emails. So that will be coming out probably next week. So back to you, Major Polson. Or no, I'm sorry, to Chris or Sergeant Bailey. Are you on?
Chris here. I don't hear Sergeant Bailey, so I'll take it over. Yeah, want to send a very warm welcome to our newest sustaining member, which is Wolpert, who comes along with these ladies and gentlemen here. It looks like just gentlemen, from 4 members from Wolpert, and as well as Major Lance from 786. So welcome on board. You can write to me or to Daniel Bailey there, his email address. And here's our just a list of our standard sustaining members. Always great respect and thanks to them for being part of the team. And we're always looking for more interested companies to be part of our organization. So please reach out if you're interested. Thank you.
For the Rhein-Main Post, we have 3 new members. Andreas Huber from the 786, Ava Hirschbach from the Corps of Engineers, and Doug Brown from Wolpert. And if you're interested in becoming a member, you can reach out to Michael Urbach, and there's his contact information. The sustaining members for the Rhein-Main Post include these here, and we appreciate your sponsorship and support. I mean, we wouldn't be anything without your support. Thank you. And then we have a sustaining member spotlight from Jacobs.
Yeah, thanks, Charisse. If you want to pull up our slides, I'll start with an introduction. I'm Chandler Ogden. I'm the operations manager for Jacobs Federal Business in Europe. I'm based out of the Kaiserslautern office and split my time between Mainz and Kaiserslautern. We are very happy to be able to share a little bit about our company here with the audience and talk about Jacobs as a sustaining member for SAME. We're actually sustaining members for many chapters, happen to be sustaining members for Rhein-Main, Kaiserslautern, and actually the UK chapter as well. So regionally focused, we're very supportive of the organization and happy to be an active part of it. Giving everybody a little bit of an overview about us as a company, Jacobs is the we're number one in Fortune's most admired companies list for 2020. We're the #1 AE design firm in the world per Engineering News Record. The slide says 2020. I did check and confirm that we're actually in the same #1 ranking for 2021 as well. We're about 56,000 people globally. We have an annual revenue of about $14 billion. We're in 40 plus companies and have more than 400 offices. Next slide. This is kind of a picture of our global footprint. We're a little bit of everywhere. Obviously more dense in some areas. We're a US-based company, obviously, but have pretty heavy footprint in other parts of the world as well. Next slide. So kind of relative to the audience here, this is our footprint in Europe. The majority of our staff are based in kind of 2 primary locations. Throughout the UK, we have multiple offices in the UK and have a large design center in Poland as well, but have offices pretty much spread throughout the theater. Next slide. Our business is basically divided into kind of 2 primary lines of business. One is critical mission solutions. The other one is people and places solutions. The critical mission solutions is kind of more consultative, technology leading, consultative type practice. We do advanced facilities, digitization, and climate adaptation. We have a long list of the types of projects that we support there. We pride ourselves on investing and being forward leaning towards the key challenging problems in the world today. Next slide. The people and places solutions, the part of our business that supports DoD delivery that I'm aligned with is under the people and places solutions. We obviously support a lot of facilities type work through our work here throughout Europe. As a business, obviously we go across all sectors and all industries and focus on delivering our best solutions to our clients. We do actually look where we can to identify opportunities to work globally as one Jacobs. We have obviously very interesting opportunities to bring the 2 parts of our business together and again, solving challenging problems for our customers. Next slide. So within the defense world, we do a little bit of everything. These slides kind of show we touch all over all sectors, all branches of the government, Army, Air Force, Navy, private industry, or private defense related contractors, a little bit of everything. Next slide. And as far as the breadth of work that we provide, we do cover kind of inception through actually operations and decommissioning as well. We pretty much like to be involved in projects at all stages, and I think we have a lot to offer with the experience being so broad. We do have operational capability. We mentioned in the final stages of operational life cycle, we actually have contracts with NASA and operate a majority of their facilities in an operational mode as well as several bases and actually cities. Next slide. We did look across all of our DoD portfolio, and the Air Force is actually our #1 DoD client. We've delivered more than 3,000 projects, have about a 70% rating on our CPARs of excellent or very good ratings. And we've pretty much done projects on every base throughout the U.S. Air Force worldwide. Next slide. Back to you.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Harwell, we're ready for your presentation.
Okay, Sharice, thanks. Can you hear me? Like Sharice said, I'm on a cell phone. Our network is not cooperating, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
loud and clear.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, so as Sharice said, Lieutenant Colonel Grant Harwell, I am one of the 4 branch chiefs here on the USAFE AFAFRICA A4C staff. I'm not sure if any of our other staff or Colonel Matthews is able to call in today. Like I said, we're having some technical difficulties. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's me. I dialed in late in the car, so I'm listening. Over.
All right, copy, sir. All right, that means I can't tell too many lies about all the things that we're doing. All right, so again, just a little bit about me. I've been here on the staff for about 1.5 years. I will transition out this summer, heading over to the 435th Construction and Training Squadron, still here on Ramstein, right down the street to take command. Again, before been here for about 1.5 years, and prior to that, I was the 39th Civil Engineer Squadron Commander out at Incirlik. So, and then many years ago, I was out at Lodges Field in the Azores, Portugal, as a lieutenant. So, several tours here in Europe, and then just a lot. What you'll see as we talk through this is, I know some of you who've been here and operating in this theater have seen the changes over the years, which we'll touch on that, and then a lot of the things that we've been working on as a command and as a civil engineer division. So I'll start here in a minute with just a quick overview from the USAFE AFAFRICA command perspective, a few slides on that, and then really kind of dig into what we do on the A4C side. So next slide. This is let's see if my slide's working. All right, so the second slide was a quick video that we're able to show right now, but you've got the link there. It's just a quick 3-minute video that just kind of gives you a quick overview of USAFE AFAFRICA, kind of big picture perspective. So I think Sharice copied the link into the chat. It's also here in the slides down there, link on the bottom left. So you can watch that at your leisure, and we'll keep moving on. So the next slide, 4 roles. From a command perspective, when we talk USAFE AFAFRICA, our 4 roles there you see on the screen from a U.S. Air Force perspective, we're one of the major commands. From a joint service component, we are the air component for both U.S. European Command and U.S. Africa Command. So that, as we'll talk a little bit here in a little bit, that makes it a little bit challenging because each of those commands has their own priorities and problem sets that they're trying to deal with. And as a service component, we're supporting both of those. And they're very unique commands, different problem sets, like I said. And I believe some of the other service components here in Europe are also doing the same things. They're probably seeing the same kind of problem sets. The other unique thing here in USAFE from our staff, our commander, is the AirCom, which is the NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the air component. He is the air component commander. That's General Harigian. So there are separate staffs from the AirCom side to the USAFE AFAFRICA side. We're trying to get better as far as synergizing and talking more and Nothing more evident than the current Ukraine crisis has been driving those two staffs closer together. But it does give it makes it a little bit easier when we share the same commander, because he's trying to share this kind of the same vision with both staffs as far as his priorities. All right, so next slide. At the top, we're talking about strategic guidance. I won't read all of these, but really it's just to kind of give you a snapshot of just some of the big things, as kind of I mentioned, from a UCOM perspective versus an AFRICOM perspective, some of the problem sets and priorities that each of those combatant commanders have outlined. Obviously, the big one right now here in UCOM that I'm sure everybody's all aware of is the deter Russia, that we are, heavily focused on the past several months with the current Ukraine crisis. And again, what aligns directly with that is the support to NATO, and that's one of the biggest messaging things right now. Is pretty much everything we're doing is in support of NATO out on the eastern flank. Africa, a lot of what we do is in that set the theater. We have engineers that are solely focused on this. They do BOSS, base operations support, at 4 locations, 2 in East Africa, 2 in West Africa, and doing a lot of that BOSS support. And then again, as AFRICOM is still trying to figure out sometimes where they want to go across the theater, from an engineer infrastructure perspective, that set the theater block. All right, next slide. And again, this is just to continue to show the kind of overall complexities of supporting 2 combatant commands. So US UCOM with, I think that's actually 50 countries now, but you basically got 50 countries from each theater. So over 100 countries, you got a fifth of the world's population, 15 million square miles. We don't have the slide in this slide deck, but we have one that we show sometimes, especially with Africa, is just the tyranny of distance. Africa, a lot of people don't realize how big it is. And when you're talking east to west, from the Horn of Africa all the way over there to West Africa, it's really the same distance as traveling from, New York to, San Francisco across the United States. So it's a large continent, which brings a lot of complexities there. It's actually easier to travel from east to West Africa to come back to Europe, to go through Europe, to go through Germany, to get from one side to the other than trying to transit across. All right, so next slide. So at the top, we talked Cold War, and this is kind of what we're talking a little bit about the change that Europe has experienced over the past several years. Sure, again, like a lot of the other service components are facing these same kind of problem sets, but when you look at what a lot of times what people think Europe is, they think, Cold War era, 1990s, and all those things on the left side is what, from a U.S. Air Force service component, what we were working with back then. So we were primarily supporting, 1 combatant commander, UCOM. We had a USAFE staff, and then we had some subordinate staffs, those numbered Air Force staffs. And then all the, for lack of a better term, stuff that we had. So 25 main bases, 72,000 people, and the list goes on. 75 WRM sites where we'll talk a little bit more of those when we start talking some of the things that we've been working. And then just some of the operations tempo. No Africa, no forward basing down there. It was, again, all focused on NATO, NATO interoperability, Russian deterrence. And then Advanced 1, you'll see where it says today. Again, I've already mentioned that we support those 2 combatant commanders. We have an integrated staff. The staff really didn't grow in size. We've probably got the same or less number of people, actually less people, especially with as IMSD has come online over the past several years and taken some of the staff functions out of the MAGCOM staff. And then we only have 1 numbered Air Force, 3rd Air Force, which is really more administrative in nature. They're not a big staff, so most of that staff function comes out of the USAFE AFAFRICA staff. And then we do, again, you see the increase in mission tempo down on the bottom, and we're doing all those additional things with a lot less stuff. So, 8-man bases, which is almost a 70% reduction, 31,000 people, which is almost a 60% reduction. And, one of the biggest things that's obviously impacting us right now when we start talking some of the operations going out on the eastern flank is the constant rotation of aircraft squadrons and aircraft, because we really just don't have enough. I mean, you see a 75% reduction in the iron that's that's executing from an air perspective. And then again, talk WRM sites. I mean, almost a 90% reduction in WRM sites, which is hugely critical when we start talking other contingency operations, having equipment, vehicles, a lot of stuff pre-positioned around Europe. That is decreasing, and we're trying to slowly build that back with the advent of EDI funding, the European Deterrence Initiative funding, which we'll touch on that here momentarily. But again, all that being said, with all that increased mission tempo, and then one of the new things that's on the table down there on the bottom, that agile combat employment, which we're using some of the lessons learned in that as we've been exercising that over the past couple of years, and how we're looking at some of the Ukraine problem set, but not really an ace operation, but we're just using some of those lessons learned. And again, you see all that focus down there. Now we've added Africa. We still have the Baltics, the Levant area, Israel, and we're still also supporting a lot of operations ongoing in the CENTCOM area with forces out of Europe. All right, so next slide. Again, not gonna deep dive into this. Just to touch, just so you kind of see the complexities of USAFE Africa and how we're kind of organized. Again, USAFE, General Harrigan at the top, is also dual hatted as AirCom. We have all the wing structures on the right. So 31st Fighter Wing is at Aviano, Air Base Italy. 39th Air Base Wing is at Incirlik Air Base Turkey. The 48th Fighter Wing is at Lakenheath, UK, along with their next door neighbor, the 100th Air Refueling Wing over there on the right side out in Mildenhall. The 52nd Fighter Wing just down the road in Spangdahlem Air Base, Germany. Obviously the 86th Airlift Wing here at Ramstein, as well as the 435th Air Ground Operations Wing here co-located at Ramstein. And then the 501st Combat Sustainment Wing out in the UK that supports a lot of smaller sites across the UK, outside of the Lakenheath and Mildenhall bases. And then again, some of the construct, especially in Africa with the 435th Air Ground Operations Wing, they're also dual hatted as the 435th Air Expeditionary Wing. And they have some expeditionary groups down in Africa that again support those 4 primary locations that we talked about. And then over on the left is just the staff organization. And then again, us and the engineers, we fall under the A4 and currently working for Brigadier General Dietrich Alagi by trade. So next slide. Again, this is just to touch on, just to give you a picture of kind of the things I just hit on with those wing structures and how we're kind of spread out across the theater. Give you an idea of the airframes that those support. So Aviano, Spangdahlem, Lakenheath being fighter bases with F-15s, F-16s, and actually slide's a little outdated now because RAF Lakenheath is in the process of transitioning from F-15s to F-35s, which they have already received several of those aircraft. Mildenhall being a tanker base, primarily with KC-135s, and they've also got some Air Force Special Operations aircraft out there. And then here at Ramstein being strategic airlift hub, but as far as assigned aircraft, just some tactical airlift. And then we also have our AOC Air Operations Center here at Ramstein that controls all those aircraft across the theater. Then you see down at the bottom, Incirlik, no permanently assigned aircraft down at Incirlik, but they do support some rotational forces that are supporting primarily CENTCOM operations in Syria and Iraq. And then I've also had the ability to transition to support some Ukraine operations recently. All right, so next slide. So moving on again, this is just to break down a little bit further, just when we talk our FOSS forward operating site and CSL contingency support locations and GSUs, geographically separated units. Again, those main bases are in that lighter shade, and then all those locations across are in that purple boxes. So this is not to say that we have forces or aircraft at all these locations at any given time. This is just places that we have been operating at over the years. Right now, currently, supporting the eastern flank with Ukraine operations. A lot of things going on in Romania, especially Camp Uterzi, in Poland and Vask and Politz. even up some support going away to the Baltics between Amari, Leeuwarden, and Chile up there. But again, a lot of that in the purple is just could be rotational or is just as required. So next slide. And then again, this is a look for the AFAFRICA operating bases, like I talked about. So 2 locations out west for Agadez and Niamey that we support, as well as Shabelle in Djibouti, and then Manda Bay, Kenya, that's just off the map, just south of Somalia, that we're supporting. All right, next slide. And again, just to throw it on the slide, I'm not going to read it, but that's the overall command's mission and vision. Again, like the biggest thing is we talk about, and we'll kind of bend some of the things that we've been doing, but we talk about readiness, partnerships, and also posture is in those mission and vision that we focus our efforts on through our commander. And next slide, that's kind of what I was getting at. We say this is our General Reagan's priorities. He always leads off that it starts with people, because people are the ones that are going to make these things happen. And then he's been his priorities in those 3 big topics. So readiness, posture, and partners, which as we get into some of the A4C, the engineer things that we've been doing, I'll talk through those things through the lens of those 3 priorities here a little bit further in a moment. All right, next slide. So this is just a quick snapshot of just some of the things that, again, have been going on over the past, several months. This doesn't really show any of the Ukraine stuff. I have a slide that I added at the end. We'll talk through a little bit that in more detail. But again, some of the things that we as a command support. So you see Operation Castle Forge a couple of times. That was a big exercise late last year. Blue Flag, that's a big exercise out in Israel. The Bomber Task Force, which is a rotational units coming in, a variety of different bombers that come in rotating through Europe. Talked a little bit about ACE, Agile Combat Employment, is really just trying to be more agile from an Air Force perspective. We operate, our primary location we operate out of is air bases. Air bases are, can't really move them. It's not like an aircraft carrier where it can move around. So ACE is trying to get after some priorities of how do we be more agile, how do we move about theaters to employ combat power and be a little bit less predictable to a potential adversary. And then again, we talk about partnerships. So Romanian Air Force C-130 partnerships there on the air side. And then I'm sure everybody here is also aware, Operation Allies Welcome, Allies Refuge, supporting that huge effort here. Primarily out of Ramstein, but then a lot of support just across the theater. And what this doesn't really highlight is obviously engineers have a play in pretty much all of this, indirectly supporting aircraft as they're going forward, infrastructure. Operation Allies Welcome, a huge lift from the 86th Civil Engineer Group here, making a huge camp basically out on the flight line to support about 35,000 Afghan refugees that passed through here last year. All right, so next slide. So that's kind of into that. Just a couple of pictures just to kind of showcase that from a USAFE AFAFRICA command perspective. So next slide, from the USAFE AFAFRICA Civil Engineer overview, we'll talk a little bit more in detail from an engineer perspective. So next slide. So talk about a proud heritage. These are just a few pictures out of the Air Force engineers have a book called The History of the Air Force Engineers that was published about 10 years now. But you can see some of the history. Obviously, everybody knows that the long history that Europe has had. Air Force air engineers have been supporting operations all the way back to World War II. From the picture in the upper left, not necessarily Air Force engineers, but aviation engineers back in the day. Back in that instance, constructing some aircraft for revetments. That was in Anzio down on Italy. And then you look over on the top right. So as you get a little bit more infrastructure. So that's, supporting those big airlift missions. That was the Lebanon crisis. That was about the time that USAFE adopted what we at the time called Civil Engineer Mobile Teams, which was a forerunner to what we now call Prime Beef, which is Base Engineer Emergency Force Program. And really what that is just Air Force engineers that are assigned to an installation, assigned to a base level, to build, sustain, maintain, and recover Air Force installations, which enable that combat air power to fly from those airfields. Down the lower left, we talk a lot about this exercise here on the staff. It comes up quite often. Exercise Salty Demo was done back in the 80s at Spangdahlem Air Base. That was a huge full base focused recovery air exercise. Probably one of the last big events where an entire base really 100% full focused on a mission set. You know, from engineer perspective, you can see some of that airfield damage repair techniques that was used back in the 80s. And, you know, they shut down the airfield and they couldn't fly until the airfield was repaired. And again, a big focus for engineers. They also had a CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological threat that they were facing as part of the exercise as well. And then you see over the right as we transition into the 90s, so as the deployment from the 823rd Red Horse out of Herbert, construction at Tent City in Bosnia, supporting those operations. So again, Air Force engineers have been in the theater, you know, ever since World War II. So next slide. All right, so this is our Civil Engineer Division overview. So we have about 56 personnel. We're down a little bit on the civilian side. We've had a lot of transition. But we have, you can see the breakout there. We're organized into 4 branches. So again, we're organized geographically, as if that had transition happened a few years ago, as opposed to most branches on the staff are usually organized in a plans branch, maybe an operations branch. Because of how the command is organized, that we're supporting those 2 unique, distinct theaters. The decision was made a few years ago to transition for us to be organized geographically as well. And then we have a small branch out in the UK of 2 engineers that mainly support there's a lot of contract support through the UK Defence Infrastructure Organization, DIO. So they do a lot of interface with them to make sure that our main UK bases are supported adequately through those contracts. And then my branch, the Contingency Support Branch, so I have a lot of the functional things that don't really fit cleanly in the geographically focused branches. And I do a lot of support to primarily Africa and Europe, not so much maybe to the, to the UK branch from the DIO perspective. I have EOD, Fire, EM, which you can see down there on the bottom, our subject matter experts. One of our big missions is also the Nuclear Accident Incident Response Task Force that falls under me. And then as where the Europe branch, they're primarily focused on those exercise-related construction programs, which you don't really have a lot of right now because most of our construction is European Deterrence Initiative or EDI-focused infrastructure projects across the theater. And then our Africa branch, like I talked about before as well, mainly focused on the day-to-day base operation support out at those forward locations out of Africa. And then one of the other big things that I've been working on over the past year and a half, that I'll talk a little bit more in the partnership focus section towards the end, is how are we integrating our engineer capabilities with our NATO partner forces in order to operate in a contingency here in Europe. So next slide. And again, just pictorially how we're organized. So again, Colonel Matthews at the top as our branch chief. We have a Deputy Lieutenant Colonel Allen, our Chief Enlisted Manager, Chief Master Sergeant Ross Owenbach, and then our 4 branches down there at the bottom. Other thing to note on here is we have several Air Reserve component staff teams we call them S teams, short for staff teams, staff augmentation teams. One out of the Maryland Air National Guard, one out of the North Carolina National Guard, and one out of Air Force Reserve Command. So the unique thing that we actually have here right now is Mr. Josh Tyler, who is our Europe branch chief. You can see down at the bottom. He is also Colonel Josh Tyler out of the 627th Civil Engineer Flight. And he is actually activated on orders right now as Colonel Josh Tyler, supporting some of our Ukraine effort, as we also have some active duty augmentees as well as some other ARC support that was actually here before the Ukraine crisis, but supports us on a routine basis. And then one of the unique things that we have stood up during the Ukraine crisis is some of Colonel Tyler's personnel, as part of the 622nd Civil Engineer Flight, are actually supporting us remotely out of their home office at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Georgia. So it's a lot of good support from the reserve side, and we cannot do what we do here on the staff without our reserve component support, whether it's our aligned S teams or whether it's just across the Air National Guard or Air Reserve component. All right, so next slide. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more. We'll start with posture. So next slide. Talked a lot about Africa operations. So again, this is just show you some pictures. The two biggest things we're focused on are the bottom, those expeditionary basing and bear base buildup. One of the big ones that we had about a year and a half ago, as the administration was changing, the direction was given that we were all U.S. forces would vacate out of Somalia. So one of our locations I mentioned prior, Amanda Bay in Kenya, was actually set to close, and then within a matter of a couple weeks, all of a sudden it was like, nope, we're not going to close it down. We're going to plus it up, and we're going to expand that camp to support an additional 800 personnel and 8 or 9 or 10 airframes on a very small airfield. And oh, by the way, we have to do it in about 45 days. So huge lift from our Africa branch. We sent a team of engineers out of the 435th CTS and here at Ramstein, the 86th Civil Engineer Group, and a couple of our folks here from the staff. We had a captain that went down and led it and got the mission done and met that timeline and got that base built out in time to receive those forces. All right, so next slide. So also from a posture perspective, one of the big things, and this has mainly been led out of our Europe branch, a lot of this has been EDI funded, but we have a program called Deployable Air Base System Facilities, Equipment and Facilities. We call it DABS-FIV. So think of an air base in a box. It's a WRM, War Reserve material. It's just a different flavor of WRM. It's a little bit more tailored down. You can see there are some of the pictures. The picture on the right is a conceptual picture of our site in Sonum with some additional storage sites added. But Sonum in Luxembourg is our main WRM storage site, and then these DABS-FIV warehouses will be postured across Europe in strategic locations that we will posture 17 of these kits in it. I think 9 or 10 different warehouses. So some warehouses will have more than one kit that can be forward deployed then further past, to support whatever those operations are. I think there's a slide here in a second. Yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide. This slide might be a little bit dated, but really the intent was just to give kind of an idea of where those warehouses will go and kind of just the anticipated fiscal year that's supposed to happen. So you can see Sonum, Luxembourg, it's already funded. And then on down across those several locations. And then you can see when those are supposed to be finished as far as beneficial occupancy all the way out to 2025 was the last date that I have. But if anybody has any specific questions on this, I'll defer to our Europe branch, or I'll get you an answer, or even Colonel Matthews. All right, next slide. And then just continuing on, just to give you an idea of the flavor of when we start saying EDI or European Deterrence Initiative projects. European Deterrence Initiative started many years ago as ERI, European Reassurance Initiatives. And then this is just an example of some of the bigger projects that we as a command have been executing. And these projects, a lot of them are large size. So again, we can't do them without our partners. So you can see again, construction agents, Corps of Engineers. We're also partnered with, we have AFCEC and IMSC Det Force here co-located with us at Ramstein. So we have several EDI funded civilian positions, both here on our MAGCOM A4C staff, as well as the AFIMSC Det Force staff that directly support these projects. From basically programming, requirements identification, and then handoff through when we hand them off for execution through Det 4, and then obviously onto the Corps of Engineers for execution. So again, just a snapshot there of some of that. Those specific examples are out at Camp Kutaisi in Romania. So again, hazardous cargo pad, parking apron. As I previously mentioned, there will be a DABS warehouse out that way, some temporary hangars, and things like that. So again, mostly airfield focused, storage focused, MUNS focused, enabling combat air power to be able to operate out of a forward location with the things that they need. All right, next slide. So we have this in here just to highlight. So exercise-related construction is another fund source that we have used in the past. We don't have a lot of it right now. Really, the only exercise-related construction projects that are ongoing for us are down at a couple of sites in Israel. And then those will eventually transfer over to CENTCOM as the Israel will eventually transfer from UCOM to CENTCOM. So again, not a whole lot in the ERC realm, but it is a program that's part of the greater USAFE A4C portfolio. All right, so next slide. So switch gears, we'll talk a little bit about readiness, which is a little bit more in my lane from the contingency support side, as well as, again, when we start talking a little bit more about partners here momentarily. All right, so so next slide. So USAFE Radar employment. So Radar is Rapid Airfield Damage Repair employment. For those of you who may not be tracking, the Air Force has been in the process over the past about 10 to 12 years of modernizing our airfield damage repair capabilities and TTPs. So we're in the process of fielding that here in USAFE. So we will get all of our main bases, with the exception of Incirlik in Turkey, will get a Radar kit. That kit comes with a variety of vehicles, lots of materials. We're using a rapid set concrete, which you can kind of see down there in the picture in the bottom right. Those big super sacks, those are, we use, again, the material to clear the hole, clear the airfield. You cut the hole, and we use a cementitious-based flowable fill material that goes in first. That's actually what that individual is doing in the picture in the bottom right. So flowable fill material, again, comes in a sack, put some water on it, give it about 30 to 40 minutes to set up a little bit. And then we can use a rapid set concrete out of a volumetric mixture for a concrete cap, as well as what's still in fueling is an asphalt cap capability through a asphalt recycler piece of equipment. But again, our main bases here in USAFE will get those, as well as we'll have our main bases get what's called a medium-sized kit, which a medium is just really a couple small kits put together. And then those 17 DABS kits across the theater will also have a small Radar kit, which is something like 60 or 70 vehicles, and then like 12, 15 connexes full of this material. So a little bit different here in Europe. So our main bases in stateside will not be getting these same types of equipment kits at their main bases. They will go to regional training sites to get training on this. So Europe and the bases in the Pacific will actually get these kits at the main bases. So when we say training at home station, that's going to be the primary focus, especially here again in Europe and in the Pacific. So they will be able to have the ability to, one of our biggest impacts right now is we have space to do that, which we're working on, but they will have the ability in the future to do full size, crater repairs, as far as exercise at their home station. And then we have our Silver Flag Contingency Engineer Training Site here at Ramstein Air Base, which right now is our primary way where a lot of engineers are getting some of the training, because we do have the equipment and the space to do that. Silver Flag will transition here in a few years to be more of what we're going to call a validation exercise versus a training exercise. And then just again, the pictures, that picture on the bottom left is just to show you kind of conceptual what some of those warehouses at the main bases would be. Because as part of this fielding of this, we also have, and again, in addition to the DABS warehousing projects, there are warehousing projects scheduled at each of the main bases to store and do maintenance on these vehicles and equipment. And again, that picture on the bottom left is just kind of a conceptual what would be at a base in the future. All right, next slide, just a little bit more about Silver Flag. Again, it's our contingency engineer training site. So we actually have across the U.S. Air Force, there are 3 sites. So there's one in Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. PACAF has one at Anderson Air Base, Guam, and then we have one here at Ramstein Air Base, Germany. As I touched on right now, it's a 10-day curriculum that will change in the near future to be really kind of 2 5-day classes, where we will be more of a 5-day validation and then really a 5-day Silver Flag training class that don't necessarily have to be conducted simultaneously, but that's still in development and it's still in the beta phase of trying to work the details out. But the main focus is right now, when we start talking Silver Flag, is open, establish, and maintain the airbase. So having engineers, it's treated like a deployment. You show up on site, they do some hands-on training. It's a little bit of classroom training, but very quickly transition to hands-on training with equipment. And then from a leadership perspective, they are charged with, hey, you're given a site plan. You're given a site plan and a mission you have to go support. So you need to plan your bed down, and then you need to go execute your bed down. And then once that bed down is executed, there's a 2-day exercise at the very end of Silver Flag, where the first day is more of, again, they do some of that establishing and opening, kind of at the same time. They're also doing recovering at airbase, because they're doing it in a threat environment where they have to respond to and recover from attacks. And then leading to the second day is heavily focused on that rapid airfield damage recovery exercise, getting your airfield open in order to accept and launch that combat air power. All right, next slide. So again, this is just some pictures of the Raider training. So this is one that the 86 CEG here at Ramstein and the 52nd CES out at Spangalum. We're doing a couple of days of training about a year ago. And again, you can see some of the equipment. So volumetric mixer down on the right. We got big saws as part of this kit to cut out and clear. A lot of loaders, what we call CTLs, compact track loaders, the little Bobcat pieces of equipment down the lower left, and then excavators and things like that to clear holes. All right, next slide. Again, just another example. This is just out at Lake and Heath when they did some training again at their site out in August of last year. Again, just another, you can see another variation of the saws that we use that are mounted to the CTLs. It's a big 60-inch saw, carbide tip, dry cut saw that cuts out, and we cut most of the Raider focuses around a 6x6 or an 8x8 foot crater. Although that is changing from a European perspective when we're also looking at larger style craters as well, up to 30 and 40 feet in diameter. All right, next slide, and we'll quickly go through this because the partnership is really just a lot of pictures. But next slide, starting with, again, even down at the base level. So the 52nd Civil Engineer Squadron, this is some of the local relief that they did last summer when Spangalum, the Spangalum local community experienced some flood. So Spangalum engineers, just went out and did it. What engineers do is respond and then help those communities to recover those homes, sandbags, and things of that nature. Next slide. Again, just an example. This is one that Colonel Matthews and I actually went to last year. Kind of between this and some of our engagements with Silver Flag kind of kicked off what we were trying to do, which was put a lot more focus on engineer engagements and how we're working with partner nation engineers. And really the common theme when you look at the why, that really has kind of driven the why of what we're doing across all of our engineering engagements, because a lot of what we're after is not trying to, tell a partner engineer force that you need to use this type of equipment or this type of technique. It's more about just how are we identifying those differences and gaps so we can better work together and increase our interoperability when if an event happens, because everybody's going to have their own pieces of equipment, their own way of doing things, and it's just more about how we're working together in those times of crisis. Next slide. Again, this is the top Joint Training Coalition Engineer Training Opportunities. Again, build common understanding of our capabilities and limitations, which might drive, maybe how a different partner nation is going to do things a little bit differently if we know we're going to work together. And again, how we identify those gaps that affect that interoperability. We've been very heavily focused on an airfield damage repair because a lot of nations across the European continent especially as you move further out east, have very minimal or almost no airfield damage repair capability inherent to their military organizations. So that's something that we're also always trying to build upon. And then one of the ways that we started doing that, it was Silver Flag. So Silver Flag is a defined process. It's a class that's been going on for years across the Air Force. So it was very easy to invite some engineers, some partner engineers from across Europe. So calendar year 21, you can kind of see some of the folks that we had out. We started with a few observation events where they came out and watched and kind of get an idea of how we train and what we're doing. And then we had some folks that came back end of last year. So we had a big contingent of Dutch engineers split across 2 classes. We had some German engineers. The German engineers want to come back again this year. And then we also had a handful of Romanian engineers participate as well. And then the Belgian engineers that observed in September, they're looking to come back as well later this year to attend the full class. And then here in our next class in May, finally getting some UK engineers to come out and observe, just because of the complexities of trying to get out of the UK and into mainland Europe over the past year, especially with COVID, has really slowed a lot of things down. And then you can just see some of the future interests that we have from a lot of nations that are interested in coming to either observe or to participate in Silver Flag over the next year or so. And then most of these rest pictures, I'll click through them pretty quick so we have some time for a few questions. But really these next set of slides are a lot of pictures that show some of the events that we participated in. So back last summer, we had the opportunity, myself and my pavement engineer had the opportunity to go down to Israel in combination with AFCEC and the USAFE ERDIC team, the Engineer Research and Development Center. Israeli Air Force is interested in buying the fiber reinforced polymer mat system, which is a replacement to our old folded fiberglass mat system, which what that system does is you can kind of get an idea in the 2 bottom pictures. If you have a large crater, you clean out now this mat was not, in the caveat, this mat was not put on a crater, it was put on good asphalt because it was more of a test of the mat. But the way the system would work is if you have a large scale crater, you excavate it out, you clean your hole, you fill your hole with several layers of crushed aggregate and stone, you bring it up to the level of your pavement, and then you put this mat on as a FOD cover, as a foreign object debris cover, which then you can have aircraft launch and recover off of. So Israeli Air Force is interested in buying this because they use our older system, the folded fiberglass mat. So we were actually out there getting to see some live flight testing with the F-35 and the F-15, which you can see the picture of the F-35 doing some touch and goes in the top left. And then the top right just shows kind of how the system comes in big 20-foot connexes, and then it's got some smaller containers that have all the toolkits that go with it that you can see the Israeli engineers down the bottom right using to install the system. All right, next slide. All right, so Dutch engineers, this is one of our first events last year. We had, again, this is the precursor to Dutch engineers coming out for a full participation. But they just, Dutch Army engineers, as Dutch engineers have all their engineering capability in their Army. This particular company who came out is focused on airfield damage repair. And as well as with this Dutch Army unit, as well as what we found with a lot of units that do have some sort of airfield damage repair capability, they're kind of in the same mindset that we are. They, over the past, 10, 20 years, been focused on contingency operations in, either Africa or the Central Command area of responsibility. They're trying to do some of the same things we're doing, which is rebuild some of their capabilities and capacities to focus on that near peer adversary type threat. So they're very interested in trying to rebuild some of their airfield damage repair capability. So next slide. Also in concert with the Dutch, my MAGCOM pavement engineer, Mr. Joe Piotto, which you can see there in the blue shirt on the right picture and the top picture, he is what we call contingency airfield pavement evaluation certified. So one of his jobs is to go out and do airfield surveys across the theater to give us data in order to determine if airfields can support operations specific airfields. Dutch engineers basically use the same equipment that we can see. You can kind of see the picture maybe down the bottom middle picture. That's the DCP, the dynamic cone penetrometer. For those of you who might be familiar with that piece of equipment, it's just a contingency piece of equipment. You drill a small hole in the pavement, and then you can use that piece of equipment. It's hand operated. There's no battery. There's no power required other than, again, the drill to drill a hole, and you can get that data. So Dutch engineers, again, they use the DCP very focused on dirt LZs and wanted to learn more about pavement distresses, whether it be concrete or asphalt. So we spent a fair amount of time, again, on the two pictures on the right, talking through the process of how you identify and categorize both pavement distresses through asphalt and concrete. All right, next slide. Again, just more pictures. This was some pictures from our trilateral silver flag last year with our Dutch and German engineer counterparts. There's also a bigger story there. The link's down at the bottom if you're interested in looking at that later. These pictures you just pulled from that link. A little bit more details there, but overall good event. And like I said, continuing on some of those further future events with our partners there. Next slide. This is a French engineer exercise that I got to go observe back in March. And as we've, again, slowly been determining a lot of very similar pieces of equipment. Again, there's only so many ways to cut open a hole and repair a piece of concrete. But they are using the picture you can see down the bottom, a little mobile 2 cubic meter air transportable, C-130 air transportable mixer that they use to repair big craters. So it's actually something that we learn a lot when we see things like that, we don't necessarily know that those type of pieces of equipment may exist. And something like that for us is very appealing. For the downside of our big radar kits is they're very large, they're very heavy. It takes a lot of time and logistics support to move. They're really built to be staged at a main operating base and used at a main operating base. So something like this little mobile mixer we look at is, hey, that's a good idea for if we're deploying forward and we're not taking a whole big radar kit with us. That could potentially give us capability to do some concrete repairs as you see there on the bottom. All right, next slide. One of the other ones that just recently happened. So we had the Israeli Air Force. We've slowly been building the engineer relationship. Again, it started about a year ago when we went down to visit them as part of the FRP live flight testing. We invited them to come observe a silver flag this past summer, which they came up and attended that. They also toured we have a mobile aircraft arresting system depot here that the 435th CTS runs. So they do our arresting system repairs and overhauls for the entirety of the command. And then they also have a capability to install the mobile system that you see here to support fighter aircraft exercises at forward deployed locations that might not have a permanently installed barrier system. And what this barrier system does is, if you're not familiar with it, very similar to what you see on an aircraft carrier with the cables that stop an aircraft when it's landing. However, this system is not used in that manner. It's an emergency use only. So if a fighter aircraft experiences an in-flight emergency, maybe it's a braking system or a hydraulic issue, whatever, they have a tail hook on those aircraft that they can land and take this cable, and it stops them before they roll off the end of the runway. So these mobile systems allow us to have that capability at an airfield at a forward deployed location that might not have a permanently installed system like we have at our main bases, and then a lot of our NATO partners have permanently installed systems. But the Israeli Air Force has the same exact mobile aircraft arresting system that we do, and they wanted to get better at how they install it because they don't install it and use it near as much as we do. Whereas our guys take about a day to install a system, they were taking 3 days. So they gave them some tips and some procedures on how to expedite and make their system a little bit faster. And then they have their own arresting system depot as well in Israel. So they're going to come back in October and spend some time at our arresting system depot here at Ramstein to learn how they can improve some of their procedures for doing their overhauls. Next slide, future engineer engagement opportunities. So again, we talked about silver flag to us. That's just a stepping stone. One of the things that we're trying to continue to push is, okay, if we started with silver flag, what's kind of the next step? So just for an example, the Dutch engineers came out for silver flag. They want to do more. So we've partnered up with all the Ukraine crisis kind of slowed us down a little bit, but we are partnering the Dutch engineer unit up with the 86th Civil Engineer Group and basically say, hey, go. We're going to go plan and execute a small scale focus, whether it's an airfield damage repair, a small troop construction project. Dutch engineers have invited us out. They've got an old airfield out in the Netherlands. They say it's about 4 hours away. Perfect place to go train. We can cut up their concrete. We can repair it. We can do whatever we want. So those are kind of some of the opportunities we're looking at as we expand this. And then eventually the long-term goal is to also some of these exercises that you see here. We talk Arctic Challenge 23, Air Defender 23. Those are some larger command level exercises that are historically flying focused, and then trying to get more engineer and support involvement and interaction with our partner engineers as part of those bigger airfield or air flying focused exercises. And then again, continuing to expand CBRN, EOD, fire department opportunities, as well as, again, some of those airfield payment evaluation procedures. We've actually have Romania now is interested in some sort of engagement opportunity on the airfield payment evaluation, similar to how we did with the Dutch. All right, next slide. I think this is getting towards the end. I got one more, I think, to talk a little bit about Ukraine, but again, kind of this is just the tie all together. So we talked posture, setting the theater. Those European Deterrence Initiative funded construction, again, that's funding a lot of those WRM pre-positioning and how we're getting after some of those shortfalls you saw at the beginning of the slide. We're doing, I hate the phrase, but we're doing more with less, because we have all that ops tempo and we have less stuff to do it with. So EDI is trying to build back some of that capacity, specifically for some engineers and even some of the other communities when we start talking aerospace ground equipment that directly supports aircraft. That will also be in those DABS kits as well again as the ability to bed down. So again, buys back some of that capability that we've lost over the years, as well as that radar fielding. So again, radar being as part of the DABS kit as well as home station. And then how are we enabling our engineers to train and employ that radar at home station as we get that fielded at the main bases. Didn't talk a whole lot about ACE, but one of the things that from an ACE perspective, ACE is really about pushing out and trying to, again, be more agile, but ACE operation and ACE employment is always going to return to the main operating bases. So a lot of times engineers get left out. Sometimes we don't look at it as we're not part of the ACE employment. But while ACE might take fighters forward for a set duration of time, they're always going to come back to the main operating bases. So our engineers are key to making sure those main operating bases are being able to be supported, being able to be recovered in a time of crisis or in a contingency type environment. And again, that second bullet under readiness, how are we, making sure we can recover the airfield to enable that combat air power to either go back out, return home, reset, regroup, rearm, refuel, and then go back out and take the fight back out. And then the partnership realm, a lot of what we're having to do, again, because we've lost a lot of that basing across Europe, and as we've seen, even more importantly through this Ukraine crisis, is we rely heavily on host station support at a lot of these forward airfields. A lot of those sites that you saw in purple across the theater on that earlier slide, we rely on those host nations to provide a lot of support. And it varies across the theater, obviously, based on what that country can support and provide. But, how do we determine the level of what we can provide and what we can do and the things we can't do? Again, it's through those engagements, those trainings, through those touch points that we increase that interoperability and that capacity for us to work together with those host nation engineers that then enables those things at the top we just talked about when we start talking agile combat employment to go out or enable the things that we're doing right now in Ukraine, not in Ukraine, but in Poland or Romania, supporting our NATO partners out east. Again, a lot of that is relying on those host nation support. And I think this is the last slide. So again, I threw this in kind of last minute last week, but a lot of what we're doing, this is current operations, but again, current operations is Ukraine focused. Won't really deep dive this a whole lot. A lot of it is on the classified side, but this is just some examples of some stories that have been published by our public affairs, a lot of the operations that are going on. Only could really find one. You see the one on the right was talking about some firefighter engagement out east, and I think that was in Romania. A lot of the other stories that you're going to see are all aircraft iron focused. So F-35s going up to the Baltics down in the bottom left. F-35s originally arriving when they first deployed out here to Spangdahlem, some Navy aircraft arriving to Spangdahlem, and then again, Spangdahlem down there in the bottom right when they're deployed forward. So again, as I kind of mentioned before, when we talked a lot of the operations and things that goes on, these operations, can't happen without engineers and the larger logistics enterprise that enables those things. So there's a lot of behind the scenes support. We have an engineer control center that's been stood up since, I think, January. We were 24/7 for a little while, and we've scaled back a little bit as operations have kind of, I won't say slowed down, but I'll say leveled out, because we're still very busy. We have we have several augmentees that are deployed here from CONUS. We have several Air Force engineers that are supporting us now. And again, even some of the stuff that we're working on right now is some of the longer term. How are we going to sustain this going forward? Because as the command has kind of mentioned numerous times, this is going to be long-term support for NATO. There will be NATO, and again, this is just the U.S. Air Force focus. What you're not seeing here, but you will see if you follow some social media and some other news articles, is a lot of NATO focus and a lot of NATO countries doing the same or similar type stuff that we're doing. Forward deployment of aircraft, Dutch, UK, Spain, Germany, France, all those countries are providing aircraft and support out to the eastern flank, primarily in Poland and Romania, but all as well up into the Baltics. So I've talked a lot. I think that was it. As far as the last slide is just questions. So I can't see anything on the chat, but if I know Sharice can probably read them out, but if you've got any questions, please let me know, and I'll stop talking and let any questions. Over.
Okay, thank you, sir. I see one question in the chat from Tim Conley. Says, can you please provide any updates on the status of Mildenhall in terms of consolidation?
Okay, I'll tell you what I know, and then I think Colonel Matthews might still be on. He could probably add to it, but I have not been directly involved in that. But the European Consolidation Initiative, or I think it's what it's called, was reversed a couple of years ago. So Mildenhall and I think it was Alconbury that was scheduled to close. They're scheduled to remain open because all that has been reversed from a posture perspective. So they've got a little bit of an uphill battle because they've had some issues with their DIO contract between Lakenheath and Mildenhall that directly supports them, which is what, again, our engineers in the UK branch have been mainly focused on over the past couple of years. But they've got, some challenges ahead when it comes to trying to get after some of the infrastructure problems that have kind of been left. They were just, hey, we're not going to worry about it because we're closing. So if Colonel Matthews is on, I'll let him chime in and see if he has anything else to add on that, sir.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon. It's Colonel Scott Matthews. So what I would say is Grant is exactly right. The European infrastructure consolidation decisions were reversed, especially for RAF Mildenhall. So that location will remain open. So I know right now the 100th CES as well as the MSG and the Wing Commander are focused on an area development plan or a base, kind of a base installation master plan refresh about what they can do to recapitalize some of their facilities that desperately needed it, as well as their infrastructure that was, probably I would say best case it was under investment over the period of time when we thought it was going to close. So I think you'll see current missions that are there will stay, and then we'll look at investments. There may be some smarter ways to do some realignment of certain things. The base has some ideas on freeing up some land use, because those that have been on Mildenhall understand it's a pretty constrained piece of property within the fence line and what they're able to do there. So all that we know today is Mildenhall is off the potential closure or closure list and is open for business as one of our key tanker hubs for the European theater. Over.
Thank you. Chris Wilkes, you have your hand up.
I do, yes, thanks. Thank you, sir, for the great presentation. First of all, Chris Wilkes here, Atlantic Contract Poland. My question is, Do you encourage outreach from industry to your office or anyone in your organization regarding new technologies or offers that can be found in Europe and Africa? And what's the best way to do that? Who's the person to reach out with some capability information? And thanks.
I mean, I think from my perspective, the short answer is yes. We're always interested in that. I mean, if we're talking something specific like, you know, from our airfield damage repair perspective, probably me. That's probably the biggest area that we as an Air Force have been modernizing. Now, I'll also caveat that to say that when we start talking Raider, it's also getting a little bit more in depth in that. Raider is a family of systems. So the purely engineer crater repair, which we call RDR, rapid damage repair capability, is just but one piece. There's also the assessment piece, and then there's also an EOD UXO clearance piece to that. So I'd say me. However, I'll caveat that with a lot of that R&D and design, when we start talking different things, will really be led out of AFCEC, Air Force Civil Engineer Center, and the office out of Tyndall that does a lot of R&D with that. But I will say that if you think that there's something that, you know, we might be interested in, sure, push it to us. We'll take a look at it. I mean, just case in point, the little 2 cubic meter mixer that I saw in France, you know, that's something that I saw at a partner nation. I'm trying to feel out other engineers in the community to see, is that something that we would be interested in? I mean, me personally, I like the idea. I've pushed it to AFCEC, and I've pushed it to some of our engineers in PACAF because I think it's potentially a good solution for them, how they're doing, especially when you look at PACAF's problem set. When they do their ACE operations, they're basically island hopping. They have to be able to be, you know, fly out, self-sustaining for a certain amount of time. I mean, in Europe, logistics is going to be hard in a contingency, but at least we still have, you know, rail and road that we can transport things. So I see equity in things like that. Again, that was a long answer to say, I think, yes, we are interested. It would probably depend on what it is and what kind of context is. But if we're, like I said, if we're talking Raider and airfield damage repair, you can start with me. If it's something else, you can always bring it to me, and I can try to link you into the right person within our A4C office that might be more appropriate. Over.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that answer. I appreciate it.
Are there any more questions from folks? You're welcome to come on camera and come off mute and ask. Major Paulson did put a note in the chat that if you want PDH or continuing education credit for this presentation, you can send him an email. His email is in the chat.
Hey, Sharice, it's Scott. The other thing, I just expand a little bit on Grant's last answer to Chris. I would say, Chris, so one of the things that we are interested in, and it is, you have to look back to, I know with many that are looking at business development, sharing technologies, is we don't have pretty deep pocketbooks here at the command anymore. There used to be, so a lot of those things that I would say business development wise are really, or ideas are at the installation level. I think that's where we grow a lot of fresh ideas or helping them solve their immediate problems. I think where I see us in the future, and I had a little bit of this, I was just back at Tyndall Air Force Base last week for the Reinstatement of Readiness Challenge, and they had a good DV day that was focused on Readiness Challenge, our civil engineering wartime readiness skills competition that we have not done since like the early 2000s, either 2000 or 2001. And then they also had a DV day, the second day, to look at the Tyndall rebuild, and they brought in AFWorks and some of the innovation things that they're looking to try to build into our installations of the future. What I would say is the thing that we are always going to try to get after here, that we're looking for good ideas, and we can work with Tyndall and the research and development side as well as some other partners, is really the speed at which we can deliver facilities and infrastructure that right now that I feel that Milcon is not the quick solution, right? And the stuff that we're building now or cutting the ribbons on was developed back in 2014 or 2015, and we're just taking beneficial occupancy on some of that stuff. So I will tell you, I see, I know there's some work going on down at Tyndall right now with adaptive manufacturing or 3D printed facilities. How could we use that in an environment, whether here in mainland Europe or in Africa theater or some other location? Also, I was telling somebody, my daughter showed me Elon Musk's house, his $50,000 tiny home that in the company that did that, and looking at some of those, what could we build in a factory on an assembly line, and then reconfigure, ship the site, and cut down that amount of time it takes to get something built and in place. And I will tell you, from my view, I'm not necessarily worried about having a 50-year or 70-year structure. The way some of our missions change, that maybe something in the 20-year or less may be just fine for what we need for a period of time. So as we look at the authorities that we have, the time to go from concept, idea, design, whether that's printed, and then moving out and getting a facility turned back to a mission owner, and cutting and reducing that time are always important to see what we can do, balancing with the direction that we have to follow the UFCs or country guidance. Over.
I think this was a great presentation, very informative. Are there any other questions? Well, then, Colonel Matthews or Major Polson, would you like to close us out?
Yeah, sure. So I just say, first of all, a big thank you to you for continuing to get the information out and keeping us informed on all things SAME. I will tell you, I know right now, if Seth, I caught the part of Seth's information. It's that time of year that we are looking to fill officers and board positions in the Kaiserslautern post. We're going to try to move up and get some folks before they PCS. But if you're interested in serving, we are more than welcome to bring you in. And I tell you, our board of direction this time has really put in some great work. And I think taken what the previous group has done and built on it, and moved us forward in a very positive direction. Look forward to seeing what this post continues to do. And then I would say for everybody else, don't forget about JETSI. Those that may be going, I know I'm be 3-week TDY. I'm going to Dayton, then JETSI, and then down to our DT development team in San Antonio. So look forward to catching up with folks for the first in-person JETSI in 3 years. And look forward to some of those side conversations, which are really beneficial to hear what's going on and catch up with peers and contemporaries there and get some good education. I find that's fascinating on seeing some of the topics they bring in to really kind of stretch your mind and get those professional development hours. But other than that, great things going on with STEM, and glad we're able to support the summer camps this year, and then still trying to get our scholarship stuff information out to capture and give some money out from our golf tournament last year. So that's all I got. I really appreciate all your support, everybody that's a part of SAME. And if you're going to be there, look forward to seeing you at JETSI out here.
Thanks for the presentation, Colonel Harwell. It was awesome.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And if you got any other questions you don't want to ask, you can always shoot them to Sharice or me via email. I'll be free to follow up with anything anybody's got. So thanks. Out here.
Stop. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.